They judged him for the vest on a customer's back, not the work in his hands. Big mistake. It was a Thursday morning in Modesto, California, the kind of morning where the sun's already burning through your shirt by 9 a.m., and the concrete smells like heat. Darnell Cooper had been at Vince's custom cycles for almost a decade and a half, and he still showed up early, every single day. Same thermos of coffee, same black boots, same quiet nod to whoever clocked in after him. Darnell wasn't flashy. He didn't brag, didn't need to. You don't survive this long in a bike shop unless your hands know what they're doing. And his did. He could pull apart a carburetor blindfolded and tell you if the engine was burning too lean just by the sound it made when you hit the throttle. That morning, Vince barked out an order across the garage. "Darnell, you're up front. Walk in." Rear belt shredded. Darnell wiped his hands on a rag and walked out toward the open bay door. That's when he saw it. A 2005 Harley-Davidson Superglide. Dirty, loud, and mean-looking, just the way riders like them. But it wasn't the bike that caught his attention. It was the patch on the man's cut-off denim vest. A red and white Hell's Angels rocker stretched across the back with a small Modesto chapter tag at the bottom. Now here's the thing. Darnell wasn't new to this. He'd fixed bikes for all types. Retired sheriffs, fresh out of jail, weekend warriors, real riders. He didn't ask questions he didn't need the answers to. If you had cash or a card that cleared, you were a customer, period. The rider was white, maybe late 42nds, with deep-set eyes, weathered skin, and tattoos crawling up both arms. "You, Darnell?" the guy asked. "That's me." Guy out back said, "You're the only one who really knows what the hell he's doing around here." Darnell gave a small smile. "Depends what you're trying to get done." The rider kicked out the stand and gave a half shrug. Belt snapped on the way in. She's spitting and popping, too. Maybe timing's off. Darnell crouched beside the bike, already eyeing the damage. "You ride it like you stole it." The guy chuckled. "Is there any other way?" And just like that, it was on. Darnell rolled the bike inside, started the inspection. They talked a little, small stuff. Engine mods, preferred oils, what tires held up best in Cali heat, nothing personal. The guy's name was Royce, didn't offer a last name. And Darnell didn't push. They shared a mutual respect. Riders and mechanics understand each other on a different level. It's about trust. You trust the person under your bike not to mess you up when you're doing 90 down I-5. After about an hour, Darnell had replaced the belt, tuned the timing, tightened the chain, and cleaned the air filter just for good measure. Royce grinned. "Feels better already, and I ain't even sat on her." Darnell smirked. "She'll hold up. Just don't ride her like you're invincible." Royce held out a calloused hand. "Appreciate it, man. You know, people don't always treat us right. You didn't flinch, you just did the work." Darnell shook his hand. "I fix bikes. I don't fix people." The moment felt genuine. Two men from completely different worlds connected by grease, gas, and grit. Darnell watched as Royce peeled out of the lot, engine growling like a dog off its leash. But someone else had been watching too. A coworker. Zach, young guy, new, thought he was slick, thought he was funny, took a photo on his phone while Darnell worked on Royce's bike. Captioned it, "Guess who's patching up the Angels today?" He didn't show Darnell. Didn't tell Vince, just tossed it on his private Instagram, thinking it'd get a few laughs. But that post, that one photo, it was about to turn Darnell's entire life upside down. By the next morning, Darnell noticed the energy in the shop felt off. Not loud, not tense, just different. Fewer huffs, less eye contact, like folks were watching him, but nobody wanted to admit it. He brushed it off at first. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe people were just tired. But when Vince walked past him in the bay without even a nod, Darnell knew something wasn't right. During lunch, he sat alone on the old bench out back like he always did. He was halfway through his sandwich when Zach came out, phone in hand, snickering. "Yo, Coop," Zach called out. "You see the comments on my story yesterday?" Darnell looked up slow. "What story?" Zach turned the screen so Darnell could see. There it was, a photo of him crouched beside Royce's bike. The Hell's Angels patch clearly in frame. Caption read, Darnell's switching teams. Guess we got to start calling him Big Red. Underneath were a dozen comments. Yo, he in deep now. Ain't that shop affiliated with the Vagos? Watch him start rolling with the crew. Darnell's chest tightened. He stood slowly. You posted this? Zach shrugged like it was nothing. It's a joke, man. Don't be so serious. Everyone knows it ain't real. But the damage was already done. That afternoon, a customer who'd been waiting on a tire install asked for a different mechanic. Said he'd come back next week if Darnell wasn't available. Another guy stood at the front counter, whispering to the receptionist, eyeing Darnell like he had a grenade in his back pocket. And Vince still hadn't said a word. Darnell knew how fast stuff like this could spin. You don't need to say much in a place like Modesto. One bad look, one half-truth story, and suddenly you're not the guy who fixes bikes. You're the guy they whisper about in the break room. By the end of the shift, Darnell had had enough. He walked straight into Vince's office, wiped sweat from his forehead, and shut the door behind him. You got a minute? He asked. Vince didn't look up from his desk. You working on that Buell? I was. Now I'm here. Vince leaned back, arms crossed. All right, what's on your mind? That picture, the one Zach posted. Vince's jaw worked like he was chewing words before spitting them out. You got a lot of nerve bringing that to me, Darnell. Darnell blinked. Come again? You think I like getting calls from old customers asking if we're working with outlaw clubs now? You think that's good for business? I fixed a man's bike. That's all I did. You know that. You fixed his bike in front of God and everybody with a smile on your face. Darnell stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides. So what? You telling me we're turning people away based on what jacket they wear now? Vince stood up slowly. I'm telling you, this ain't a good look for you or for us. But you didn't have a problem with the skinhead whose Triumph I worked on last month. You didn't care when that dude with the Confederate flag keychain dropped off his Honda. So why now? Vince didn't answer. That silence that told Darnell everything he needed to know. But before he could walk out that office, Vince said something that stopped him cold. Darnell, Vince said, voice low, I'm letting you go. Just like that. No warning, no sit down, no final write-up or probation. 15 years gone in 5 words. Darnell blinked hard. He wasn't even sure he heard it right. You're firing me for what? Vince looked down at his desk like the paperwork might give him the courage he didn't have in his own spine. It's not a good fit anymore. A good fit? Darnell's voice cracked. I trained half the guys in that shop. I've stayed late, worked holidays, took pay cuts when you asked. Now I'm not a good fit. Vince avoided his eyes. This isn't personal. Everything about it is personal. The room felt small, airless. Darnell's ears were ringing. He couldn't tell if it was heat or anger or just disbelief. You know what this is, he said, voice low now. It ain't about no damn photo. You're afraid of what people think, not what's real. Vince didn't deny it. Didn't even try. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a thin envelope and slid it across the desk. Final check, plus your vacation hours. Darnell didn't touch it. You ever think what kind of message this sends? He asked. To everyone else, to the young cats in that shop watching how you treat people. Vince finally looked up. I'm thinking about keeping my doors open, Darnell. That's what I'm thinking about. Darnell stared at him for a long second, then turned and walked out without a word. The sound of the office door clicking shut behind him felt louder than any argument. The shop was quieter than usual. He could feel eyes on him, some curious, some guilty, some pretending they hadn't heard the shouting. Zach was in the corner pretending to refill the coolant shelf, but he wouldn't meet Darnell's gaze. Back at his station, Darnell opened his drawer, pulled out his toolbox key and unlocked the chest he'd been filling for 15 years. Socket by socket, wrench by wrench, all paid for with honest labor. He packed slow, deliberate, no rush, like he wanted every person in that building to watch him leave and remember it. On his way out, he stopped at the time clock, clocked out for the last time, didn't say a word. Outside, the heat hit him like a slap. He sat behind the wheel of his old Silverado and just stared at the dash. Everything was quiet except the ticking sound the engine made when it cooled down. His phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Heard what happened. That was wrong, bro. I'm sorry. No name, no courage. He tossed the phone on the seat. That night he didn't sleep. Just lay there staring at the ceiling fan, spin slow overhead, thinking about how fast a man's reputation could be taken away. Not because of what he did, but because of what other people thought he did. 15 years of work, loyalty, and sweat, erased by one photo and a handful of scared whispers. But he wasn't broken. He was angry. And underneath that anger, something else was building. Resolve. Because if he didn't find out who really started this, he'd never be able to clear his name. And he wasn't about to let a joke ruin his life. The next day, Darnell woke up early out of habit. His body moved like it still had a shift to start. Coffee, shower, work boots. But this time there was no place to be. He sat on the edge of the bed for a while, staring at his callow, used hands. His phone buzzed again. Another message from an old coworker. Man, that was messed up. You good? He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his keys, loaded his toolbox into the truck bed, and headed into town. Not for a job. Not yet. Just to move. Think. Keep from sitting in that silence. He stopped by Skip's Auto, a family-owned garage on the south end of Modesto. Skip was old school, white in his 60s with a gut and a limp, but he never treated Darnell like anything less than a man. They'd done some side work together over the years, shared a beer once or twice at a cookout. Skip spotted him pulling in and walked out wiping his hands on a greasy towel. You look like you just buried someone, he said. Just got fired for doing my job, Darnell replied. Skip raised an eyebrow. Heard some rumblings about that. Something about a biker. Darnell nodded. Guy from the Hells Angels. Walk in. Needed help. I fixed his bike. That's it. Skip shook his head slowly. Let me guess. Some punk took a picture. It got twisted up and Vince folded like a lawn chair. That about sums it up. They stood there for a beat. Skip leaned against the doorframe, squinting at the street. I hate to say it, he said finally, but I've seen this movie before. You're black and he was a white biker with a reputation. People start assuming things. Nobody wants the heat. They let you take the fall. Darnell didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The truth had already been spoken. You need anything? Skip asked. Money, work? Appreciated, Darnell said. But I'm not done with this yet. That night, Darnell sat at the kitchen table staring at the photo Zach posted. It was still up. Dozens more commend. TS now. A few were jokes, others weren't. One of them said, So Vince's shop is doing business with gang members now? Another, I always knew something was off about that dude. He clicked through the usernames, local folks, people he'd seen around town, and then he found one that made his stomach turn at Reeves Body Paint 209. It was a rival shop across town. They weren't subtle either. The caption on their repost read, Our team keeps it clean. No gangs, no questions. That's when Darnell understood. This wasn't just some prank gone wrong. It was calculated, used against him. There were people who wanted him out of the picture. And Vince, he didn't defend Darnell, didn't correct the story. He just let the narrative run wild, let people think what they wanted if it meant protecting his image. Darnell opened his notebook. He started writing down names, dates, comments, anyone who had shared or reposted that image. He wasn't planning revenge. He was building the truth step by step. And as he sat there collecting the threads, a knock hit the front door, heavy twice. Darnell stood up slowly, opened it. Standing on the porch, wearing the same vest as before, was Royce, the Hells Angels rider. I heard what happened, he said. Darnell didn't answer. Royce looked him in the eye. Mind if I come in? But what Royce was about to say would flip the whole situation on its head. Darnell stepped back just enough for Royce to come in. He didn't say welcome. Didn't need to. The room was quiet except for the buzz of the old refrigerator. Royce looked around like he hadn't expected it to feel so normal. Just a clean place with family photos, tools on the table, and the smell of fresh cough. Lingering in the air. I saw the post, he said finally. Didn't take long before it started getting round. Darnell leaned against the wall, arms folded. Guess it doesn't matter what the truth is when the lie sounds better. Royce gave a nod. Yeah, people love a story, don't care if it's real. Then he looked Darnell straight in the face. You lost your job over that. Darnell gave a short breath. Fired the next day. No discussion. Just bad optics and a final check. Royce's jaw clenched. You ever stop to ask who wanted that to happen? That got Darnell's attention. What do you mean? Royce sat down across from him, pulled out his phone, and scrolled through some messages. There's a guy I know from back in the day. Bodywork shop near the freeway. Name's Trevor Baines. Used to ride, used to talk big, never patched in. Always wanted to be affiliated, but nobody trusted him. Ree's Body Paint, Darnell said, already connecting the dots. Yeah, that's him. I heard he's been trying to run Vince out for years. Kept saying the shop was losing authentic riders. This was his shot. All he needed was a crack. Darnell stared at the table, feeling the weight of it. So he took a photo that wasn't his, spun a lie, and spread it to cut Vince off at the knees. Royce nodded. He reached out to a guy I know, asked if I was doing business with your shop. Told him I'd drop my bike off. Next thing I know, he's reposting your photo and talking like I'm your blood brother. Darnell let that sit for a second. Why are you telling me this? Royce stood up. Because you didn't judge me. I walked in wearing that patch and you treated me like a man. That matters more than you think. Darnell followed him to the door. Royce paused before stepping out. You get the truth straight. Let me know. I don't mind setting the record right if that's what it takes. As the door shut behind him, Darnell felt something shift. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a setup, a calculated one, and he knew exactly where to start. The next morning he showed up at Vince's shop with a folder under his arm and a fire in his chest. He didn't go through the side like he used to. He walked straight in the front and waited until Vince looked up from the register. What the hell are you doing here? Vince asked. Darnell set the folder on the counter. This, he said, tapping the cover, is everything. Every repost, every comment, every message linked to that photo. Most of it tied back to Trevor Baines and Ree's Body Paint. He's been trying to squeeze you out for months. Vince's face shifted, but he said nothing. And the kid who took the picture, Zach, he's the one who handed it over. Might want to ask him how much Baines paid him. But what Vince did next, Darnell never could have predicted it. Vince stared at the folder, hands resting on the counter like he wasn't sure whether to pick it up or throw it in the trash. For a moment he said nothing, just stood there, face tight, eyes flicking between the paperwork and Darnell's face. Then he finally spoke. You saying Zach sold you out? That he was working with Baines? I'm saying you fired the wrong man, Darnell replied. Vince opened the folder and flipped through the pages. There were screenshots, repost timestamps, comment logs. At the bottom, a printed message between Zach and a burner account. An account linked to a number used by Reeves. Body Paint. Zach had sent the photo himself. He sold it, Darnell said. Not for much either. Couple hundred, that's all it took. Vince rubbed the back of his neck. His voice dropped. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. Vince looked up tired now. You gotta understand, Darnell. People were calling. Clients we've had for years, my rep was on the line. So you threw me under the bus. I made a call under pressure. Doesn't mean it was the right one. Darnell nodded once. No, it doesn't. Just then the glass front door opened and in walked Roy. Vest on, boots muddy, sunglasses hanging from his shirt collar. Every eye in the room turned. He didn't wait for permission. He walked straight to the counter, stood next to Darnell, and slapped down a small stack of glossy flyers. Y'all want to know who I am? Royce said loud enough for the whole shop to hear. Name's Royce Benton. I ride with the Modesto chapter. Been clean since 2011. Run a halfway house for ex-cons out in Ceres. That man, he pointed at Darnell, treated me with more respect than half the businesses in this town. Fired him for working on my bike. That's coward work. Silence. Royce leaned in close to Vince, voice low now. You know how many of your clients got family locked up? Folks that made mistakes but trying to do right. You gonna fire them too when someone comes knocking? Vince didn't answer. Royce looked around the shop, then back at Darnell. You let me know if you open your own spot. I'll bring every rider I know your way. He gave Darnell a nod, solid, real, and walked out the door like he owned the place. Vince rubbed his face, sat down slowly behind the counter, and sighed. I messed up. Darnell didn't argue. "I can try to fix this," Vince said. "Put a statement out. Talk to the press. You come back, we get ahead of it." But Darnell was already shaking his head. "I'm not coming back." Vince looked surprised. "Why not?" "Because you didn't have my back when it mattered. And now that the smoke's clearing, you're just trying to protect your name. I can't work in a place where loyalty only goes one way." He picked up the folder, tucked it under his arm, and turned to leave. As he walked through the front door, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. "You want to make this right," he said. "Start by telling the truth loud and clear." But Darnell wasn't done yet, because if this town had turned its back on him, he was about to show them what rebuilding from nothing really looked like. The next week moved fast. Darnell didn't sit still. He wasn't the type. Instead, he got to work making calls, knocking on doors, shaking hands, people who knew his name, who'd seen his work, who had bikes in their garages, and no one they really trusted to touch them. One of the first to answer the call, Royce. He wasn't bluffing when he said he'd bring riders. Word spread through the community. Black riders, Latino riders, even a few white guys who kept their politics quiet but their bikes loud. A patch didn't matter. What mattered was honesty, skill, someone who didn't talk down or jack up prices just because you looked like you didn't belong. By Friday, Darnell had 4 bikes in his driveway and a 5th being trailered in from Stockton. He wasn't waiting for a building. He started from his garage. A folding table, a jack lift, old tools, and a plastic bin for parts. But it worked, and it felt real. Then the story hit local news. Mechanic fired after helping biker. Was it fair? They didn't get everything right, but the core was there. Zach had leaked the photo. Reeves' body paint had spun it into a smear. And Vince, he gave a quote at the end, voice shaky on the recording. "I made the wrong call," he said. "I let fear talk louder than facts." The phone started ringing. Some calls from reporters, some from old clients who felt bad for staying quiet. A couple just said, "Man, we saw the news. That was wrong." And then there was the one that made Darnell pause. It came from a woman named Charlene Morales, a retired parole officer. She ran a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated writers get back into the workforce. Said she had a few guys with tools and time, but no one who'd give them a shot. "You build something," she said. "We'll send you work. Good men. Just need a break." Darnell sat in silence after that call, not because he didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in days the bitterness started to lift. That weekend, he called in a favor from Skip, borrowed a small corner of the old junkyard next to his lot. Skip said he'd help him pour concrete if it came to that. Said the city owed him anyway for a mess they made years ago. They set up a tent, brought out work lights. A few guys showed up with their bikes and their stories. One of them was Marcus Brightite, 39, fresh out after doing time for a bar fight that got out of hand. Had been turned away from 2 shops that week. Darnell handed him a wrench. "Ever pulled apart a primary?" he asked. Marcus grinned. "Not in a while, but I still remember." That moment mattered. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about giving people like Marcus a reason to show up, just like Darnell used to do every morning at Vince's shop, long before a photo made him dangerous. Later that night, Darnell updated the nameplate on the garage. Cooper's Rebuild and Repair underneath, painted in red. No judgment, just work. But even with momentum building, there was still one last surprise waiting, something Darnell never saw coming. The Monday after Cooper's Rebuild and Repair officially opened, a matte black Ford F-250 pulled into the gravel lot just after noon. Darnell was under a Yamaha Vustar, wrench in hand when he heard the door slam. He slid out from under the bike, wiped his hands on a rag and looked up. It was Vince. No clipboard, no folder, just him. Wearing jeans and a wrinkled shop tee, hands in his pockets. Darnell didn't say anything, just waited. Vince looked around. Tarp-covered bikes, tools on plastic shelves, a few riders sitting on folding chairs drinking from paper cups. Nothing fancy, but it felt alive. "You built this fast," Vince said. "I didn't have time to waste," Darnell replied flatly. Vince nodded slowly. "I came to say something. Maybe late, maybe it don't matter, but I'm going to say it anyway." Darnell crossed his arms, but didn't stop him. I got scared, Vince said. Not of you. Not really. I got scared of what people would say. The looks, the whispers. Thought I was protecting the shop, but I didn't protect the man who kept it running. Darnell said nothing. Vince took a breath. You made that place better. I never told you that. I should have. And when all this happened, I should have stood next to you, not behind the door. Darnell looked him in the eye. Wah. Done? Vince nodded. Yeah. Good. Then listen. Darnell stepped forward. You didn't just fire me. You made it okay for everybody else to turn their backs. You made silence feel normal. That don't just disappear. I know, Vince said. I won't ask you to come back. I wouldn't if I were you. I just wanted to say what I should have said before. He turned to leave, but paused. You need anything? Tools, lifts, scrap parts. I mean it. It's yours. Then he walked back to the truck and drove off. Darnell watched the taillights disappear, then looked back at the garage. Inside, Marcus was helping a teenager clean an air filter. Royce was leaning on a workbench, helping another rider patch a tire. And on the wall, someone had taped a handwritten sign. Your past ain't a problem here. We just fix things. Later that week, Darnell was sitting on his porch when an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a crisp note, handwritten. You were done wrong. You didn't fold. Much respect. Enclosed is a token of support from those who ride. There was a check. $5,000 signed simply Modesto chapter. Darnell sat there a long time staring at it. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. The same patch that got him fired was now the reason his shop might grow. Funny how life works. By the end of the month, Cooper's was pulling in steady work. People who'd heard the story. People who respected the way he handled it. Even writers who said they'd never trust anyone again until they met him. Darnell didn't chase revenge. He chased purpose. And in doing that, he found something more valuable than any job ever gave him. His voice, his peace, his pride. He didn't have to shout. He let his work speak. And this time, everyone listened. Because reputation can be taken in a second. But respect that's earned, rebuilt, and protected with every choice you make. Don't be the one who stays quiet when someone's being torn down. Speak truth. Stand tall. And remember, silence can do more damage than hate ever could. Now let me ask you, what would you have